On the 14th of September, 1889, a labor crew working for the Northern Pacific Railroad under the supervision of Foreman James McCreery was cutting a rail bed through a low ridge approximately 12 miles east of the town of Billings, Montana. The ridge was composed of sandstone with clay interbedding, standard geology for the Yellowstone River Valley and that stretch of territory. McCreery had been foreman for the company for 6 years and had supervised cuts through dozens of similar formations across the northern plains. At approximately 11 in the morning, the forward crew reported that the cutting face had changed. The sandstone had given way to something else, a flat surface that met the cut at a right angle and ran in both directions as far as the workers could expose. They stopped cutting. McCreery came forward. What they had found was a wall. It was composed of dressed stone blocks. McCreery described them in his report as dark gray, almost black, the surface polished to a smoothness like marble or glass. The blocks were approximately 60 centimeters high and of varying width, fitted together without mortar. McCreery ran his hand along the face of the wall and found no joint he could feel. He took a folding rule from his pocket and attempted to insert the thinnest edge, approximately 1 millimeter, into a joint. He found 2 joints where the rule entered partially. In the remaining joints he could measure along the exposed face. It did not enter at all. McCreery ordered work stopped and sent a rider to Billings to telegraph the company's district engineer, whose name was Thomas Hargrove, stationed at Bismarck, North Dakota. He wrote in his field log for that date, "Struck dressed stone wall at 12 feet depth, running approximately northeast to southwest. Surface finish and joint precision unlike anything I have seen in Indian work or Spanish work. Unknown construction." Hargrove arrived by rail on the 17th of September. Montana in September of 1889 was 3 months away from achieving statehood. It was admitted to the Union on the 8th of November, 1889. The Northern Pacific Railroad had completed its transcontinental line through Montana 6 years earlier, in 1883, connecting Portland to the East Coast. The spur lines and branch extensions that followed were cutting through territory that had been, in terms of industrial disturbance, effectively undisturbed since it was above sea level. The native peoples of the region, primarily Crow and Lakota, had no tradition of dressed stone construction. Their architectural traditions used timber, hide, and earth. This was not an academic point in 1889. It was obvious to anyone with field experience in the region. McCreery had been working alongside and adjacent to native populations for 6 years and had never encountered anything resembling dressed stone construction with polished faces. His immediate notation in his log, "Unlike anything I have seen in Indian work," was not an anthropological judgment. It was a practical one. The depth of the wall was significant. McCreery recorded it at 12 feet, approximately 3 2/3 meters. The sandstone and clay overburden above it showed no signs of disturbance or fill. The layers were continuous and undisturbed, consistent with natural deposition. For standard geological accumulation rates in the Yellowstone Valley sediment basin, 3 to 4 meters of undisturbed overburden represents a minimum of several hundred to several thousand years of deposition. This was not a recent construction. Hargrove arrived on the 17th of September and examined the wall with McCreery. He brought with him a company geologist named Frederick Oates, whose official function was to assess rock conditions for construction purposes. Oates examined the material of the blocks. He described them in his supplementary field note, appended to McCreery's report and filed with it, as follows. The blocks are of a dark igneous material, possibly a fine-grained basalt or a related volcanic rock. The surface is polished to a degree that reflects light. I tested hardness by scratch test with a steel blade. The blade left no mark. This is consistent with a surface hardness of 7 or above on the Mohs scale, which is the hardness of quartz. A basalt surface of this hardness suggests either exceptional material selection or a surface treatment whose nature I cannot determine. Oates also described the tools found inside the chamber. McCreery's crew had broken through the wall, not deliberately but because the initial cutting had exposed a section that was not fully backed by the adjacent block, and a portion gave way under the continued percussion of the blasting work. Through this opening, McCreery had lowered a lantern and looked inside. The chamber was approximately 6 meters long, 3 meters wide, and approximately 2.5 meters high. The interior walls carried the same polished finish as the exterior face. The floor was flat stone, equally polished. On the floor, arranged along the eastern wall, were objects. McCreery described them as metal implements, tool-shaped, 10 to 15 of them, varying in length from perhaps 8 inches to about 2 feet. He described their color as dull silver with a slight yellow cast, unlike iron or copper or brass. He attempted to move one. He described it as unexpectedly heavy, denser than it looked. He did not remove any of the objects from the chamber. Oates, who examined the objects through the opening the following morning, wrote in his note, "The implements are of a metal I do not recognize by color or apparent weight. The color is intermediate between silver and pale gold. No corrosion is visible. The surface of the largest implement, which appears to be approximately 60 centimeters in length, carries a pattern of shallow channels that appear to have been cut into the surface. Whether decorative or functional, I cannot determine." The Billings Gazette, the principal newspaper serving the eastern Montana region, published on the 22nd of September 1889 an item headlined, "Strange Discovery Near Billings." The reporter, identified in the paper's masthead records as Howard Linfield, wrote, "Workmen employed by the Northern Pacific Railroad have uncovered a stone chamber of unknown origin, approximately 12 miles east of this city. The chamber, found at a depth of 12 feet, is built from polished stone and contains metal objects of a composition not recognized by the company's geologist." Foreman James McCreery has stated that the construction is unlike any native or historical work known in this territory. The Billings Gazette ran no follow-up piece. The Helena Independent, the largest newspaper in the state capital, picked up the item on the 25th of September in a condensed form, describing it as a curious archaeological find near Billings, and noting that a Northern Pacific engineer was on site. No further coverage appeared in the Helena Independent. The company's district engineer, Thomas Hargrove, submitted a consolidated report to the Northern Pacific Railroad's headquarters in St. Paul, Minnesota, on the 3rd of October, 1889. This report is referenced in the company's St. Paul correspondence log under the entry, "Geological Incident, Yellowstone District, September 1889. The report itself is not in the Northern Pacific Railroad archive held at the Minnesota Historical Society, which received a substantial portion of the company's records after its bankruptcy and reorganization in 1893. The archivist's note for the correspondence log entry reads, "Reference document not located in transferred files." On the 5th of October 1889, construction resumed at the site. The Northern Pacific's standard procedure for archaeological obstacles was to route around them when possible, or to proceed through them when not. The chamber was sealed by construction fill, and the rail bed was completed on schedule. The chamber's location, 12 miles east of Billings, at a specific distance and bearing from the rail line, can be approximated from the construction records. It has not been excavated. The objects McCreery and Oates described, dull silver-yellow metal, no visible corrosion, apparently high density, with incised surface patterns, do not correspond to any metal or alloy in standard archaeological use in pre-Columbian North America. The metals documented in pre-Columbian North American cultures are primarily copper, widely used in the Mississippian and Hopewell cultures for ornamental and ritual objects, and in the Southwest, occasional use of iron from meteorites for ornamental purposes. Neither copper nor meteoritic iron is described as dull silver with a yellow cast. Neither is described as corroding poorly or not at all in soil conditions over geological time. The color description, silver with a yellow cast, is consistent with several modern alloys, platinum group metals and their alloys, some titanium alloys, or certain compositions of nichrome or stellite, all of which are 20th century industrial materials. It is also consistent with some naturally occurring mineral compositions, but naturally occurring minerals of this type do not form tool shapes with incised surface patterns. Oates was a professional geologist. He worked with metals and minerals in the field. He described what he saw and acknowledged he could not identify it. This is a specific, trained observation of, "I don't know what this is," not a layperson's confusion. The objects were left in the chamber when it was sealed. If the chamber's location can be established from the construction records, and if any portion of the original chamber survives beneath the railbed embankment, the objects are still there. The pattern of anomalous underground chambers found during railroad and mining construction in the American West is not represented solely by the McCreery find. In 1879, workers on the Central Pacific Railroad cutting through the Sierra Nevada foothills near Dutch Flat, California, encountered a stone-lined tunnel at approximately 15 feet depth. The company's engineer, identified in the Sacramento Union of the 12th of August, 1879, as W.H. Bishop, described the tunnel as approximately 4 feet in diameter, lined with flat stones set without mortar, running approximately east-west. The tunnel was blocked at both ends by collapse or deliberate filling. Bishop directed workers to photograph it. The Sacramento Union described a photograph being taken and submitted a report to the Central Pacific. No photograph has been located in the Central Pacific's surviving records held at the California State Railroad Museum in Sacramento. In 1885, miners working a silver claim near Leadville, Colorado, broke into a chamber at approximately 30 feet depth that the mining company's geologist, Theodore Godfrey, described in the Leadville Daily Chronicle of the 3rd of March, 1885, as lined with worked stone of a precision exceeding any masonry I have examined, containing fragments of metal objects of unknown composition. Godfrey submitted samples of the metal to a Denver assay office. The assay office's records for that period are held at the Colorado Historical Society. The entry for Godfrey's submission in March 1885 lists the sample as alloy, composition not determinable by available methods. No follow-up entry is recorded. In 1891, workers on a copper mine in Arizona near the town of Globe encountered a sealed stone chamber at approximately 25 feet depth. The Arizona Silver Belt newspaper of the 28th of November, 1891, described it as a room of worked stone, precisely fitted, containing objects of apparent metal manufacture of which the nature could not be determined. The mine's superintendent sealed the chamber and resumed operations. His report to the mine's ownership, the Old Dominion Copper Mining Company, is referenced in the company's correspondence log. The report is not in the company's surviving archive. These are not the same find. They are different sites, different states, different years. But they describe the same category of object. Underground chambers of anomalous construction quality, found during industrial excavation in the American West, containing objects of unidentifiable metal composition, documented in 1 or 2 newspaper items, and then sealed and removed from the accessible record. McCreery filed 1 report. He did not file a second. The Billings Gazette ran 1 item. It did not run a second. Hargrove's report went to St. Paul in October 1889 and was referenced in the correspondence log under Geological Incident. The document is gone. The chamber is 12 miles east of Billings, beneath the Northern Pacific railbed, under whatever depth of construction fill was placed on top of it in October 1889. The polished walls are still there, if they survived the fill operations. The metal objects, dull silver with a yellow cast, no corrosion, incised surface patterns, are still on the floor of the eastern wall, if they were not disturbed. The railbed over which this location passes has been in continuous use. The Northern Pacific was absorbed into the Burlington Northern system in 1970, and Burlington Northern merged with the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway to form the Burlington Northern and Santa Fe Railway in 1995. The line through the Yellowstone Valley still carries freight. The chamber is below the railbed. McCreery's report is listed in the correspondence log, but not in the archive. Oates's supplementary note about the high-hardness polished stone and the unidentifiable metal, that note was filed with McCreery's report, which is not in the archive. 2 men looked through an opening in a polished stone wall in Montana in September 1889 and saw something on the floor that neither could identify. One of them wrote it down. The other confirmed it in a supplementary note. Both documents went to St. Paul. Neither is there now. The objects are still in the chamber. No one has looked for them since 1889. The explanation does not exist. The question of what the chamber was is inseparable from the question of who built it, which is inseparable from the question of when. Montana in 1889 had been continuously occupied by human populations for at least 10,000 years, based on the archaeological evidence available at that time and subsequently confirmed. The Clovis and Folsom cultures, whose stone tool traditions are found throughout the northern plains, date to approximately 10,000 to 13,000 years before the present. The Paleo-Indian populations of this region were hunter-gatherers, mobile, following game across a landscape that was, at the end of the last glacial maximum, substantially different from the semi-arid grassland of 1889. The official chronology of pre-Columbian North America does not include dressed stone chamber construction anywhere on the northern plains. The architectural traditions documented for this region are all surface constructions: timber lodges, earthen mounds, hide-covered structures. Underground construction in stone with polished faces and sub-millimeter joint tolerances is not in the record. Not for the historic tribes, not for the Mississippian cultures that built mound complexes further east, not for any documented pre-Columbian population of the northern plains. This creates a stark problem. Either McCreery and Oates observed and documented a structure that does not fit any known cultural tradition of the region, a structure left by people or a cultural tradition not in the official record, or their observations were substantially in error. Oates was a professional geologist. He knew stone. His description of polished to a degree that reflects light, with hardness consistent with a surface hardness of 7 or above, is a technical observation, not a layperson's impression. Surface hardness of 7 on the Mohs scale is the hardness of quartz. A basalt surface polished to this hardness reflects light. His description is internally consistent. McCreery was an experienced foreman who had been working in this landscape for years. His comparison, unlike anything I have seen in Indian work or Spanish work, is a specific comparative judgment from someone who had direct familiarity with the construction traditions of the region. Two experienced, trained observers described the same anomalous thing. They documented it independently, in separate reports filed together. Neither contradicted the other. The explanation for what they saw has not been proposed. The metal objects on the floor of the chamber are the most specific anomaly in the McCreery-Oates documentation. Metal objects of dull silver with a yellow cast that do not corrode after an unknown period of underground burial in Montana soil. The relevant soil is clay-rich and moderately acidic, conditions that corrode most common metals within decades, and that are apparently denser than expected from their size, point to a small number of material candidates. Platinum is dull gray-white with a slight warmth to its color. It can appear to have a yellow cast depending on surface condition and lighting. It is extraordinarily corrosion-resistant. It does not react with soil acids under any conditions. It is approximately 50% denser than lead, which is why a piece of platinum that looks the size of a large tool would be unexpectedly heavy. Platinum occurs naturally in the northern Rockies and in alluvial deposits of rivers draining the range, including the Yellowstone drainage system. Pre-Columbian Native American use of platinum is not documented in the archaeological record of North America, though platinum ornaments from pre-Columbian South America are known. A platinum group alloy, an alloy of platinum with palladium, iridium, osmium, or rhodium, all of which are found together in placer deposits, could match all of Oates's physical observations: dull, silver-yellow color, no corrosion, high density. Such an alloy does not appear in any documented pre-Columbian North American material culture. McCreery's description of incised channels on the surface of the largest implement is consistent with machined or worked metal rather than cast metal. Cast metal forms smooth surfaces with minor imperfections from the casting process. Incised channels are produced by removing material from a surface, either by cutting, grinding, or engraving. This is tool use on metal. Whatever made the channels was harder than the metal itself. These objects, if Oates's description is accurate, are outside any framework the official pre-Columbian chronology of North America provides. The objects are still in the chamber. McCreery did not remove them. Oates examined them through an opening and took no samples. Construction fill sealed the site in October 1889. No subsequent excavation has been conducted. The Northern Pacific Railroad's line through the Yellowstone Valley, approximately 12 miles east of Billings, passes over or near the original cut site. The exact position can be approximated by working backward from the construction records, the route survey from 1887 to 1888, the grading reports from 1889, and McCreery's own production logs, which include kilometer markers for his crew's daily advance. Cross-referencing these with the current track position would yield a probable location within a range of several hundred meters. No one has done this cross-referencing with the stated purpose of locating the chamber. McCreery filed one report. Oates filed one supplementary note. Hargrove filed one consolidated report to St. Paul. The Billings Gazette ran one article. The Helena Independent ran one condensed version. Then silence. The objects described by McCreery and Oates: dull silver yellow, no corrosion, unexpectedly dense, incised with channels, are on the floor of a polished stone chamber beneath a railway embankment in Montana. They have been there since at least September of 1889, and almost certainly for much longer than that. The explanation for what they are and who put them there does not